All right. All right. We're live.
Cool.
Yeah. So how's it going, Nick?
I've had better months for sure, but things are definitely looking up in the past week or so here. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah. How about you, man? How you doing?
Pretty good, dude. Was just in Santa Cruz today. Got a lot going on. Just recently got back from Jamaica. And got a lot to tell. You were asking me right before how the job's going, working for Redis. It's pretty good. I'm almost done with my training. I'll be fully active in February.
Cool.
Starting in February. I finished like the main chunk of my technical enablement training, and I had to give a presentation on Friday, doing sort of like an analysis of a hypothetical simulated support case and talk about the issues and whatnot, and kind of like the first trial run of solving an actual customer problem with the software related to the software. So that was cool. I was a little stressed out about it because I was supposed to do it before I went to Jamaica, and then I asked if we could push it because I was just not having enough time to do a good enough job. And then they said, "Oh, well, it's completely fine." And I said, "Okay, fine." But then I also knew coming back from Jamaica, I was gonna have to finish it that week, and being in, I was in a different realm for a little bit, so there was a little bit of me like worrying about, okay, I hope I'm not screwing up my responsibilities, but it ended up being fine. I think I was being overly critical a little bit of the work, so so it's good, and I'm enjoying it. Like I really like my coworkers. Seems like a really cool company to work for. The software is semi-unique and it's very prevalent in the industry, and
you like the product?
The product is cool. The product is pretty cool. And a lot of when I talk to other engineers, software engineers, and I ask, if they know about it, it's almost always yes. If you're not a software engineer, it's almost always no. If you are a software engineer, it's almost always yes. And many of them who have used it are have very positive sentiments towards it. So that's kind of cool. And and I'm just excited to do more of that work and kind of get in the flow of that once things fully ramp up. So yeah, it's good.
Cool. How you like medical app? Are you doing like med apps or?
No, not yet. That's I'm still volunteering. I'm trying to do 2 days a week volunteering.
Gotcha.
At the hospital. It's cool. I like it. I mean, I'm just doing such a wide variety of things for them because it's sort of just like I go there and now they know me and they trust me. And so they're like, just like whatever the hell is going on. It's like, oh, okay, well, can you do this? Oh, we need these supplies. Oh, we need this thing done. We need you to make copies. Sometimes it's just as simple as that. Sometimes I'm actually helping them a little bit with some computer stuff. Like one of the ladies that I worked with was like, she's like, you need to teach me everything about Excel and Outlook and these things because I use them and I have no idea what I'm doing and no one ever gave me training on it. And so she's like, while you're here, I just want you to walk me through it, like setting up email filters and all this stuff. So I helped her with that. Just a bunch of random things, but it's cool because now I do finally feel like, even though I'm just like a volunteer and like all these other people like nurses in this area, and I think some of them are kind of like have mixed feelings about me, just me being there and being like very like enthusiastic about it, what I'm doing, and like maybe even feeling slightly threatened by me. I mean, at the end of the day, they're government workers and the hospital, those kinds of, it's a weird culture because it's not that competitive, right? It's like everyone's kind of just there, and some of them maybe like what they do, some of them maybe don't. And especially working in the oncology department, I mean, that's a pretty depressing world to be in. So sometimes some people it's harder to vibe with than others. Some people are really nice and some people are very eager to give me things to do. I think other people are afraid to give me too many things to do because they don't want to make themselves look irrelevant or bad at what they're doing if I do a better job than them and I'm getting paid nothing, so it's kind of a weird dynamic.
What is that? That's actually really interesting.
But it's overall it's really good. The main lady that I work with is super nice and she always is very supportive and she always helps me find something to do. So I'm never just like sitting around. So yeah, it's good. Good.
Cool, man. Yeah.
Yeah. And as far as like medical school apps and all that stuff like that, my plan for that would be trying to target for like, you know, this fall or something is when I would be applying for. So I wouldn't be applying until like
You'd be applying in fall for the next
like
year,
for fall for this year.
for
That's
fall.
the idea. And
Yeah.
and again, like that's my working plan right now. There's some things that are up in the air that I'm still thinking about and working on because there may be other opportunities, but right now that's the plan, and I don't want to abandon that needlessly early. So
Yeah.
that's yeah, but I'm thinking I'm trying to shoot for fall of this year. So yeah. And
Cool.
yeah, that's decent summary of the things. And yeah, I mean, the other thing is Jamaica, but that's kind of a long story. I thought maybe it might make a little bit more sense for us to talk a little bit first about what, you know, you're telling me this stuff you've been going through with this illness that is somewhat unidentified,
Random.
not an unfamiliar experience to me.
Yeah.
But yours seems much more serious and actually debilitating and potentially threatening to your health on a greater level.
Yeah.
For me, it's just my psychological health that is bothered mostly by it. But for you, yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, I mean, yeah, I've just been living pretty normally the past few months here. I was planning on moving up to the Bay with, you know, Tyler and Mark and you know his gang.
Yep.
This I got really sick like last month. I'm gonna need you to play house with me a little here. It's actually January. About 1 month ago, all this shit kind of exploded.
Okay, it's like the symptoms started just 1 month ago.
Started, yeah.
Not recent.
We'll talk about it. Yeah, so about 3 to 6 months ago, I was having some like light back pain. You know,
Okay.
whenever I would sit down for like 30 minutes or an hour, I would stay still. Just a little bit of back pain, you know, in my lower back, same spot every time. You don't think much of that kind of shit when it's happening because, you know, it's just like, oh, it's just a little pain, whatever. If you like 24, 25, no big deal. It'll go away.
Sure.
Yeah. So December 15th of last month, I was just in my room hanging out, just literally just sitting, like watching a YouTube video, you know, something really stupid at like, you know, 7, 8 p.m. And then it felt like I got stabbed in the back all of a sudden.
Oh my God.
Just sharp, like stabbing pain. Like somebody just took a knife and just
out of nowhere.
Out of literally nowhere. Yeah.
Oh my God.
And then like it just kept getting worse and worse. And like I would stretch it and be like, oh man, like I haven't been, you know, using this. It's tight or something. But it just kept getting worse. So I went to the fucking ER. The guy tells me, oh yeah, you have a muscle spasm. I'm like, bullshit, bro. This shit hurts. Like when you play like sports and stuff, you know, and you get hit, like you're a wrestler, right? You kind of get you can kind of take pain, you know, when you're growing up, like you
of course
play water polo, like I've been fucking thrown under the water, kicked in the face, like that shit kind of hurts. You know, you get endorphins from that though. When you're in like a fight, it goes away. It's kind of shit. You get no endorphins. It's literally just fucking just raw pain.
Yeah.
Like, it's like existential almost. It's terrible. Anyways, so yeah, that happens. And then a few days later, I get sick, like sicker than I've been in my entire, like encephalitis in my brain. I can't look at lights. They make me like nauseous and dizzy and shit. Like I can't walk more than 2 blocks without needing a break for 15 or 20 minutes. Like crazy symptoms that, you know, you wouldn't see like a normal 25-year-old have.
Right.
The doctors tell me, oh, you're fine. I go to hospitals, like they run all the tests. Everything looks good for the most part.
For sure. Yeah. Everything's just clear.
Like, everything's clear. They're like, oh, you probably just have a virus or something. I'm like, dude, I fucking like, you know, a week ago, I could, you know, bench, squat, deadlift my body weight. Like fucking, I could run, I could jog from bike for miles. Like it is just, I'm in good shape, you know? Now I can't walk 2 blocks without feeling like I'm going to collapse. And when I look at a bright light, I feel like I'm going to, you know, I get dizzy and nauseous. It's like I'm going to have a seizure or something, you know? So just terrible, crazy symptoms just pop out of nowhere in like a week. And then I would go to like a million doctors. Eventually one guy comes up with, you know, he's like, oh, so you have photophobia, lower back pain that improves with movement, which is not something that ever happens. When you have like a back injury, like a herniated disc, right? You need rest, right? Yeah. You don't want to like be moving it around. Right. But for some reason, when I move, it improves the pain.
Okay. So it's not like a spinal thing, most likely.
It's not a spinal thing, no. It's just like there's no injury. I've had MRIs done. So I go to this one doctor and he's like, it sounds like you have either osteoporosis. He kind of threw that in there just to make sure he was covering it as tracks, I think.
Yeah.
Or ankylosing spondylitis. And I was like, oh,
that is spine related. right?
Yes.
Ankylosing spondylitis. Yeah.
It's a form of rheumatoid arthritis. You know, like Jordan Peterson has rheumatoid arthritis. It's like
Yeah.
a
It seems like everyone's starting to get rheumatoid arthritis these
it's
days.
crazy. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's but it absolutely just knocked me on my ass. And like now, after I got that crazy whatever bacteria in my brain, took some antibiotics I took a course of antibiotics and it didn't go away. I had to take 2 full courses of antibiotics to kill that one thing.
Wow.
Just one bacteria, which didn't make any sense for a healthy 25-year-old, right? But anyways, I go on, I get, all these other symptoms, the brain.
Oh, yeah, I was sorry.
Yeah.
So you had this, you had a bacteria that was treated by the antibiotics, but you still have something else underlying too.
Yeah. Well, now that was like, a few weeks ago, like 3 weeks ago, most of the symptoms of whatever was in me, whatever bacteria have gone away. And now I'm stuck with, and then I was just stuck with symptoms of like, like I had back pain. My vision's really blurry for some reason. It feels like somebody's like got like there's a little dude in my heart and he's just like poking my heart with a needle, just like giving me a little stab once in a while. It's real weird. And then just like back pain and neck pain. I wake up every 4 hours at night and I have to do yoga for 30 minutes or an hour before I can go back to
bed. Are you serious?
It's really terrible. And that's been going on for like the whole month. So so now I literally can't get a full like 8 hours of consecutive sleep. I have to sleep 4 hours. I have to take a pain.
You'll just spontaneously wake up.
I'll just wake up in pain. Yeah, I'll just wake up in agonizing pain. And I'll have to take another painkiller. I'll have to move around, and then I can go back to bed. It's weird being like pseudo nocturnal.
Yeah, dude, you're gonna start having like Freddy Krueger freaking nightmares at some point.
It already hits me in my dream. The thing is, it doesn't give me any anxiety anymore. Like I just know it's a part of me, like this is how life is. Like,
but I mean, like you're gonna start having like micro dreams from just like your sleep just being disrupted for such a long time. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you mean. At the hospital, I started having it was hard to sleep because there's
borderline hallucinations.
I was getting some crazy auditory hallucinations in the hospital.
Oh wow.
I was super sleep deprived. They were like sleep depriving an autoimmune kid that would wake me up every couple hours for tests, and I was like,
exactly. That's what I was thinking.
What are you doing? Yeah, like being at the hospital or being at a hospital is hard because doctors are hesitant to give you any treatment unless you're actually just dying on the bed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're giving you the treatment they gave you was the antibiotics, but other than that, they're hesitant because they don't really know. So they're just like, well, we're not going to just fire randomly. Right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's true. But I mean, I'm telling them my symptoms. They have a preliminary diagnosis from like a really respectable physician. Okay. They go through, they run other tests. And the only things that pop up are like, do you know anything about like C-reactive protein or like ANA?
Well, that's for autoimmune. I know ANA is for autoimmune.
Yeah. So the
C-reactive protein, I'm assuming, is a similar kind of
also test. Another marker of inflammation.
Mm-hmm,
those are the only 2 tests that showed up like relatively high, except for like my glucose for some reason. But my ANA and my C-reactive protein are like very elevated compared to everything else. Looks totally normal. And they just don't give me any anti-inflammatories at all. They pretty much have.
But those markers are like proof that you have an autoimmune condition, right?
They're evidence. Everything you can. There's no like.
I thought that there was. I thought you could get that from those kinds of tests.
I think for lupus, if it exceeds like a certain margin, and they could do like subtests for the ANA too. The whole thing's really complicated, and I'm no medical professional, and you're not, even though you might be one day. Maybe we'll have you take a look at these test results in like 5 years and be like, holy shit.
I certainly would be curious to see them because actually I've gotten a lot of those similar kinds of tests in the journey of my own chronic pain and
really? Have you had an ANA?
I think so. I think a while back. Yeah. And it was one of those things, you're kind of right, where he told me basically, well, it looks like it might be slightly elevated or something. So maybe you have lupus. Here's some medicine just to like basically get me to go away, I think.
Yeah,
I did end up taking it because I was like, I just got the feeling like this is not right. I don't think this is gonna help. It was like I think it was actually hydroxychloroquine that he gave me, I think, which is
Wow.
funny.
What does hydroxychloroquine do? Is that a
or
steroid?
no, that can't. Well, I did get hydroxychloroquine for something.
Is that a
Well,
steroid or is that like a
no, shoot. So, okay, it's well, it's a treatment for malaria, and if you recall, during this
you
whole
went to
COVID thing, it was one of those drugs that was being talked about a lot because it suppresses your immune system. So I'm pretty sure I was prescribed that. I might have also been prescribed prednisone too.
Yeah.
And prednisone is a more common treatment for lupus.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was prednisone. That one is a corticosteroid. Yeah. So, or yeah. And basically I ended up I looked at the side effects of those and was like, that's not worth the risk. You know, it was to a point where it was like, oh, you know, shit can happen with your eyes and all this stuff. And I was like, no, I don't know.
Prednisone or hydroxychloroquine?
Huh? I think it was prednisone that had those. Hydroxychloroquine, ironically, is a very safe drug, and yet, you know, the medical community was losing its mind that people were saying, hey, maybe as an alternative treatment, you might try hydroxychloroquine. Apparently, that was so out of the realm of reason and just so dangerous that to even say it, that people had to be shut down for saying that, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, all that being said, right now you are, I mean, how often are you going in to like see the doctor? Or, like, are you guys still working on stuff? Like, what's even happening with that?
Well, right now I've had everything done with like, or most tests. I have preliminary tests to kind of diagnose things. I'm still meeting with a neurologist to get kind of, you know, all that stuff knocked out. Because what you have to do for most autoimmune disorders is you have to kind of eliminate all the other possibilities.
Yeah.
You know,
exactly.
he has back pain. We got to eliminate everything neurological.
Mm-hmm.
And I've passed every neurological test. I've had like brain MRIs, full spinal MRIs, like hip X-rays, back X-rays, like the whole shebang, you know. And then every neurological test where they have you look at lights and do like my brain's fine. And there's no muscle damage, it looks like, or no tissue, no nerve damage. So everything looks good on that front. Which is kind of like a bad sign because I'd almost rather have like a herniated disc, you know, than an autoimmune disorder.
Yeah, for sure, dude. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you, man. I like the times where it's just like when with all the like, they're like, I do an MRI and they're like, oh, the MRI is clean. It's like, oh, sweet. Like now I have even less of an idea what could possibly be going on. It's like, and and the other options just seem worse. I mean, autoimmune stuff is so, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just, it's so hard to like pin down, you know. Yeah, there's treatments for it, but a lot of the treatments are like kind of like lifelong type stuff. And the only stuff that I've been able to, that I'm aware of with autoimmune that seems more like permanent, doesn't even really come from typical medical assistance, like people doing drastic lifestyle changes, people changing their elimination diets, and doing really drastic measures that are more like self-initiated and self-directed than really relying on their doctors to do much for them, unfortunately. And so
that's the scary thing too, is because even like with my own condition, the only results I've noticed is, you know, maybe prednisone or methylprednisone has helped a little bit. But the drugs have their own downside too, you know.
For sure.
But yeah, the only results I've seen are like, you know, heating pads, eliminating every like inflammatory food I can think of. I haven't eaten out in like a full month, and I love eating out, you know.
And is that like making a marked improvement?
It makes marked improvements, yeah. Wow. I look back and like I was in writhing pain on a hospital bed like 3 weeks ago, you know, like I felt like I was gonna fucking die because like it hurt so much. And that was because I was just eating like shit inflammatory food. Like, you know, like I would eat a bowl of white rice and I would just feel like my body's on fire.
Oh my God, what the hell? Do you think that would be safe? Wow.
No, yeah.
Jeez, man.
Yeah. I don't know if have you ever heard about like an inflammation attack for like an autoimmune disorder?
Well, I mean, I know that autoimmunes have flare-ups, so I'm assuming that's what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, it's horrible.
It's weird, dude. Like, I mean, well, first of all, welcome to the club, welcome to
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
unknown, welcome to the chaos of
Yeah.
reality of we don't actually understand
Yep.
jack shit. So it's really fun. It's really great to be here.
Yeah.
And yeah, dude, I think I don't know. Do you it's strange because like in my experience, I feel like my condition is it's obvious it's not debilitating. I would not
Mhm.
it's not like that at all.
Well,
And
what
in
is your
fact,
condition? Like, go into a little more detail. Like, what's your chronic pain?
right. So I mean, I've been dealing with chronic pain for about 6 years now.
Okay.
Started in when I was a sophomore in college, and you know, I was really starting to get into fitness actually at that point in my life, and just like fitness outside of athletics, like doing some weightlifting, some calisthenics,
Mhm.
strength training, and really was starting to enjoy that and get in the rhythm
Yeah.
of it and see some results. And I started doing this one program called Strong List 5x5. I think it's a great program, but I also hesitate to recommend it to people now just because I still have a concern that it played into the development of this condition
Mhm.
because the intention of the program is to increase strength and increase your lifts, and it's pretty aggressive with its frequency of progressive overload. And
Mhm.
so but it was working for me, and
Yeah.
I was taking mass gainer. I was gaining a lot of weight and felt really strong in the gym,
Mhm.
and you know that was all working. And then, but like with strong lifts, like you do all compound moves, and and you have days where you do a lot of heavy lower body work where you're doing squats, deadlift, and something like, bent over barbell row on the same day, and you're doing
Mhm.
heavy weight. And especially the
Yeah.
longer you do the program, the heavier the weight gets because you're increasing like every time you come back and do that same exercise another day, you're increasing by 2.5 pounds or as much as 5 pounds, depending. Um, and I do feel like that played into it, just I mean intuitively, and also because that's when it was during that period of time when the pain began. So I don't know enough about autoimmune stuff, but because of the fact that like with the MRIs I've done, there hasn't been anything conclusive that there's something seriously wrong with my
Mhm.
spine. I also wonder, it's like, is it possible for autoimmune flare-ups to happen from things like that, right? If some kind of deep muscle
Intense.
thing goes on,
Mhm.
right? Right? Like, I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing,
Yeah.
um, but because of the fact when it first happened, I just figured, okay, well, something's wrong with my muscles, so why don't I just take
Was
some
it
time
like a
off?
was it like a stressful program, or was it just like physically stressful, like strenuous?
It was just physically strenuous. I
Yeah.
wasn't stressing about the program at
Yeah.
all. I was enjoying it actually, and
Yeah.
but the pain like gradually came on. There was no one particular day or time that I could point to where all of a sudden it was like,
Yeah.
I ripped something. No, it was just started noticing more and more. I felt like my gait, the way
Mhm.
I walked was a little bit affected, and it's just weird. And just like, okay, it was
I
not that
feel
much pain, so it was pretty easily ignorable.
I feel like the pain gets better when you move, or like when you're more active, or like you're invested in something, or does it get
Yes,
worse when it gets worse? Do you feel it when you're like sitting down or sleeping? Like,
yes,
yeah.
yeah.
See,
When I'm
that sounds autoimmune. Yeah.
For sure. And it's interesting that you use the words, you said the phrase when you're invested in something.
Yeah.
Like for me, part of my therapy for dealing with this has been investing myself in things and getting myself
Mhm.
involved with meaningful
Yeah.
things that basically, in some ways, take my mind off of it, right? I'm
Mhm.
doing something so meaningful that I can basically just ignore it and get into flow state, and then the pain is irrelevant.
Yeah.
That's basically the only effective treatment that I've been able to really find so far. That's consistent and reliable.
Mhm.
Like everything else is just kind of like maybe this helps me. Chiropractor, physical therapist, all these other doctors and tests and things. And
Mhm. You
um,
tried acupuncture?
I did try it, but I'm gonna actually try it again because I met someone in Jamaica on the retreat who was an acupuncturist, and he was recommending a specific kind of acupuncture that they could do. And he actually told me that it might even be better to go to like a Western dry needler, as they call them, which is basically just acupuncture.
Yeah.
But he said that a lot of those Western trained uh, doctors or physical therapists can do a specific kind of acupuncture technique, and some of them are better than the traditional acupuncture trained people that you might find in the States. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and he recommended I do that. And I asked him how long I should expect it to start working, just so I don't waste time and money, because that was that stopped me last time. I went a few times and was like, this doesn't feel like this is really doing anything. I'm wasting my time, and I was worrying about that. But he recommended it. I'm going to probably try to give it another try at some point. It's worth trying anything, right? But yeah, it's been an issue for me, and like I said, it's not really physically limiting for the most part. I mean, I don't do squats or deadlift or that stuff anymore, just because I'm so afraid of making it worse. But I still rock climb like 3 or 4 times a week, and I do very strenuous activity, and then it doesn't really stop me. In fact, when I'm doing that activity, most of the time I don't even notice the pain, because I'm so involved in what I'm doing that it's not really an issue. It's more just, I find like it just makes things psychologically a little bit more challenging, and especially back in college when it first started and I was so young, and I was depressed about it. It got to me mentally and spiritually, so so that was like the hardest part about it for me, and still to this day is the hardest part, but I have a lot more tools and ways of dealing with it now. And it's not stopping me from living my life, at least to a very significant extent. It's there, and it's frustrating, and I wish I could know why. I wish I could just solve it at the snap of a finger, but it's part of my reality. So I'm just kind of finding ways to deal with it, and not coping mechanisms that are harmful in and of themselves, only healthy coping mechanisms, right? That's the other part of it. So it's okay. It's like, I mean, there's a part of me that kind of goes like, maybe it will eventually be solved, and maybe I just have to keep seeking, and I have to be open-minded to the avenues of seeking, and that's basically what I'm doing. But I also I don't have my hopes too high, because I've had my hopes crushed too many times now from that. So like it's more about the radical acceptance is more effective for me psychologically. So yeah.
It sounds like eerily similar to kind of what I'm going through right now, I guess. I think my symptoms kind of came on maybe a little bit stronger than yours did, and a little bit more suddenly. But like the ways that I'm like dealing with it isn't through Western medicine, I'll take these drugs, it'll make you feel better, or fucking just inject yourself with this shit, we'll block your immune system. It's kind of like the best ways I've found is do something active, like get out and do like yoga, or go for a fucking walk, or deep meditation, relearn how to,
which you can do now, which
I can do now, but I have trouble. I still can't go for a walk, a 30-minute walk around the block without a cane. I'm very it feels like I have a genuine disability now. I don't know, I might just be kind of screwed, but we'll see how far I can take it. But
life gives us interesting challenges, right?
It does, yeah. But I've noticed dietary things are the biggest have made the biggest difference, overall gut health and inflammation levels. Just eating good food. I haven't eaten out a single time since then. The last time I ate out, I had the craziest flare of my life. I started realizing every time after I eat, I would get these under my cheeks or right here, I would get this little rash, And my aunt started pointing it out whenever I ate food. She'd be like, oh, your things. And I was like, oh shit, it's the food I'm eating, that's the problem. And I looked it up, and there's a whole anti-inflammatory stuff. Michaela Peterson has her carnivore diet, right? I'm hesitant to try that because I'm not Scandinavian, and I feel like there's some genetic links there,
Perhaps.
Perhaps. Yeah. But I think, and in Eastern medicine, they treat autoimmune disorders completely different than they do in Western medicine.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
They kind of treat it like Avatar, you remember The Last Airbender? When he goes to visit the monk to perfect the Avatar state, right? He can get in and out.
Dude, no way you're bringing this up. I just talked about this episode very recently with someone else. Yeah, I'm not at all. Yeah, and I agree with you completely. But why do you connect this specifically to that episode?
Well, what they do in Eastern medicine is autoimmune disorders are kind of like a disruption of your flow of
energy,
right. Chakra, right? The old man would go into the river, and then he would just see this dried up series of ponds And then he walks in, and then he takes out, like his little stick, and then he takes out the thing that was blocking, like this little piece of seaweed that was blocking the river from flowing, blocking all the chakras connecting from each other. And when you have an autoimmune disorder, it kind of feels like, if I do have one, I genuinely do believe I do. Kind of feels like, like the river is like full of like sludge and shit, and it's just like corrupted, like, just a bunch of like gross energy just kind of flowing through you, and that's what causes all the inflammation and pain and shit. It feels like Western medicine kind of takes the approach of just blocking it altogether. I take a piece of prednisone. It feels like, oh, we just block it. Now there's nothing. I feel like, I feel like
zero energy going through at all.
I feel empty, like I feel like a computer program almost. I just go through my day and lots and
you're just zeros and ones at that point. You're just material. You have no soul. Yeah.
Just turns me into an NPC. Yeah.
NPC, which is like SSRIs, all this stuff.
Exactly. No, exactly. It totally bricks you. But like, there might be a way to, I guess, control and release the energy and not have it be, that sludge, like, sludge chakra just flowing through you, or just BS, or I don't know. I've been trying to look into some Eastern practices. Like, I've heard acupuncture can help. I definitely going to follow you up with you later about what the guy in Jamaica.
Yeah. There's even a website I can recommend.
Yeah. We'll definitely have a chat about that offline. But I think there's other approaches you can take other than just, like do drugs, or like maybe diet. Maybe there's like a spiritual aspect to it almost, there has to be.
I believe so, but I'm also curious to know exactly how you conceptualize that.
Yeah. I don't know. I just, in the way it like feels, I guess it's kind of just
it's funny that it's just, so it's like more of an intuitive sense that you don't really know why you feel that or what it is. I'm just curious, when you say there's a spiritual way that you can treat it, do you mean treat the pain itself or treat your experience of the pain? Like, that's right. It's kind of, because for me, I feel like a lot of what I'm doing is treating the experience of the pain. It doesn't feel like it's really treating the pain.
Do you feel like you're healing at all, or do you feel like you're just kind of distracting yourself? Like,
oh, I'm healing in every way except that part of my body. If that makes sense. Like, it's put me on a spiritual journey.
Yeah,
absolutely. But
you might have like some niche physical thing then. Like, that sounds like maybe
for sure. But I mean, but there's going to be a physical element to whatever you're going through as well. It seems very likely. Then again, I don't really believe that there's, at the end of the day, much of a difference. It's all connected, right? Yeah. So it's like, do you solve it from the spiritual perspective? Do you solve it from the physical perspective? It just depends on what the actual nature of the illness is, right? So it could be theoretically possible that through the right spiritual practices, you may, and I may even find relief eventually. We don't really know, and I don't want to discount that possibility. But so you have been doing like meditation, yoga, those sorts of things.
Yeah, I've almost been thinking, because I've been kind of living, a little bit like a degenerate, like as of the last few months. Because
I probably could have told you that, but
yeah, for sure. I'm just kind of in like a intermediate like phase of life. I'm kind of living at home for a few months here, and then like I was planning on making moves, a little bit later, and it feels like my body's, just rebelling against everything that I'm doing, right? Sitting down, smoking, drinking, doing just whatever.
Yeah, it said enough of that, son.
Yeah, it's like enough of this. It feels like almost like a way away from my body to just say, like, live, do something, do anything. Right?
Okay. And then that segues very well into the origin of my own experience, because you do remember when it first began. Yes, I was doing a lot of weightlifting, and that would seem to be an intuitive catalyst for something like this. But also at the same time, that was at the peak of my usage of marijuana. In junior year of college, you remember those days. We put away 80 milligrams of edibles like it was nothing. So, so it's funny that it happened during that period. And then guess what? Guess why? Part of why I ended up quitting weed is because this chronic pain just so happens to feel worse when I'm high when I drink. Well, not when I drink. When I drink alcohol, it probably feels better because it's a kind of a painkiller, right? But for weed, like alcohol numbs you, weed heightens sensitivity. It's supposed to treat pain, but in my case, it's like the pain just gets magnified, and to a point where I genuinely can't really enjoy the drug because it's too distracting for me. The pain just gets worse, and that's all I like start thinking about.
Yeah.
So, and that feels exactly like what you just said, where it's like my something about my being, my body is saying, this is not an option for you. We've got other things planned for you, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
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 It's almost a weird feeling because I have read a little bit on the weed, like being a painkiller, and there are a lot of placebo effects. I think that people are misinterpreting. It doesn't actually change your perception of pain or anything. There might be some elements of CBD that have some pain.
I mean, that's what
lowering
so many
effect.
people say that, right? I mean,
Yeah, but I've heard a lot of people that they treat their weed, but it might be placebo. It might not be. But like your body, yeah. Either way, I also haven't touched a drop of like THC or weed or any capacity since I've drank a drop of alcohol. I've literally just been trying to.
What do you have any like? Do you have some sort of expectation of what would happen if you did?
I'd imagine if I did, well, just because like the pain physically is relieved. Like the reason I stood up like 10 minutes ago is because like my back started hurting. I was sitting down for almost an hour, and I can't do that like anymore, like ever.
Yeah.
So I'd imagine it like weed just lets me get absorbed in like a piece of tech. I'd start watching something and then I'd be in pain, and then I'd start thinking about it more and be like, oh no, like this hurts so much, but I have to fucking deal with this shit. Like, it makes negative thought loops like really easy to kind of fall into when
that's
you're
the same thought loops that I dealt with for sure.
Yeah, you deal with those all the time. And when you're sober, you just have such an easier time just kind of like reasoning yourself out of that, or even just like emotionally kind of being like, oh, that's not something that's useful or productive or helpful to me in any capacity. Like, let's try a different approach, right? You're not going to have that you're less likely to have that mentality when you're high. At least in my experience.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, dude, I mean, yeah, I mean, most of the time weed is fun. And then sometimes you get into those head spaces where you're just like ultra like paranoid and you're like interpreting everything in the worst possible light. And that is more likely to happen when you've got some situation going on in your life that needs attention and you haven't been resolving it. And I think in the case of the pain thing, or maybe that was also just a part of my body trying to speak to me and telling me like, this is enough. It's enough. So, well, okay. That's interesting to hear you say that. So as far as like the yoga and meditation stuff, would you say that like, do you get relief from that like immediately after, or do you feel like making it a regular practice is just something that has continued to gradually improve your condition? Like,
it feels like I don't know. It might just be the movement, like focusing of energy. I guess I've been trying some like kind of Tai Chi-esque stuff. It's kind of like you just like manipulate your energy around. It's a lot of fun. Just like, I don't know, just doing pretty much anything to get your mind off of it. Anything like very calming, puts you in touch with your body, because it's so easy to just distract yourself with like a screen. Just pull up your phone and boom, you're lost in the feed. Like. And it can happen in like a heartbeat, but your body really wants to be in tune with itself, even if your mind doesn't really give a shit. So it feels like any practice that just kind of helps focus your energy on like your current surroundings and like how you're feeling. Like, oh, does my back hurt right now? Do I need to get up and move? Have I been watching something for like 30 minutes or an hour? Am I really hungry?
It forces you to be present.
It does. It forces you to be present.
And you can't just sink into the unconsciousness of the drooling, staring at the screen. Yeah.
Yeah. It's exactly what it feels like. And it kind of sucks, but it is.
I think it more than kind of sucks.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I know I wouldn't be where I am today, if it weren't for this pain. I mean, my life would look very different. I know that for a fact. I mean, I wouldn't have changed the behavior the way that I did with the speed, with the velocity that I did, set me on a completely different path. So, I mean, there's a lot to be said around that for sure, but I mean, just the practical side of it now. So you're kind of learning to like deal with this. You kind of, you made it almost sound like you kind of reached that mental space where you're like starting to wonder, is this something I'm going to deal with forever, or at least indefinitely? Like, yeah.
Yeah, well, see, the problem is, I'm not sure. Like, I had this, the theories around how autoimmune diseases get triggered are through, like, anxiety or stress, or genetic markers, or viruses and like bacteria, right? And I had this weird pain, and then I got stabbed, and then a few days later I got sick, and then after I got sick, it felt like all the symptoms I had, like slightly loss of vision, heart troubles. It felt like after I got sick, everything felt weak, which means I may just be fucked if it were like a bacterial infection that exacerbated something that was already there. Because I still can't drive for more than 30 minutes or an hour without like needing a break. I'm still greatly inhibited in my ability to walk. Like the options for lifestyle changes feel very limited to me right now, right? So if this is my body's way of saying, hey, you need to go out and do something, maybe it should have taken a slightly gentler approach,
right? For sure.
But so I'm still kind of considering what options are available to me, and I'm still trying to figure out like a diet. Maybe if I can go a couple months on like an AIP diet, or maybe I'll try the carnivore diet. It'll work and it'll improve the symptoms, because I've heard, a lot of people on the internet have had a lot of good experiences, just like, modifying their diet. And I've seen, I've even people like, I dated a girl in college who had like chronic lupus, and she made good progress, like eating shit. And she would just, I thought autoimmune shit was like so like weak sauce, when I was like dating. I was like, oh, what is this? It's like a plead for attention or something, like you're looking at it from the outside looking in. And then now I look back on it and I'm like, I am so sorry. I understand.
That's some kind of karma. That's some
literally deserve
karma for that.
It is actual karma. Yeah. It's
I was gonna ask too, just because of the way that you like described that story again of how it began. Do you remember the day that it started and like what was going on, or the surrounding events, either maybe even the day before or just around that time period? Is there anything that you could like draw any sort of connection, even though in your wildest imagination,
Emotionally, like, no. I mean, I was just kind of in like the same, I feel like kind of limbo-esque, like whatever, another day, another, dollar. Like I have a good job, but I feel very empty inside, like just kind of going through my day. And then I was just like playing video games or something. I was actually really into whatever I was. I think I was playing Overwatch 2. And I was like really into that at the time. I was actually like genuinely like having fun with like a game for the first time in a while, which is weird that it would come on in that moment, right?
Right.
But then all of a sudden, it just felt like December 15th, my second birthday. Fuck you, welcome to being an adult. Got stabbed in the back.
What do you mean your second birthday? What are you talking about?
I feel like that's just, that's when it all started, right? So I'm starting to think that's my second birthing of truly being an adult, like graduating. It feels almost like I graduated from like all the childhood, like Peter Pan kind of.
Really, so that you really feel that ever since it started, where it's like now you're forced to start making sacrifices. You can't just live your life as an amorphous potential.
Yep, right. Yep, I'm like, that shit's like just totally like the potential to even like have, it feels like a day where I feel like I can relax and like just let go of everything. And if I wanted to just smoke weed all day and like veg out, like it feels like I literally couldn't, because I would get so much physical pain. Like it would bother me to the extent where like I had to go get up and like change something. Like I have to live every moment of every day like I'm fighting for something almost.
It will be interesting to see how you feel looking back on this, a year or two
from now.
It's right now it's horrible, and presumably, I mean, if it continues to plague you, obviously, like it's always a psychological battle. Like it's never like it gets easier. In my brain, it's much easier. But also, I have this sort of vulnerability where it's like, if things go really, 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 really bad for me for other reasons, then it's like it all comes back to the pain, and I'm like, it's like it just feels like, oh, and on top of this, I'm still have this fucking
and I'm dying.
So when things are going well, I can just be like, I don't give a shit about it. Yeah, it's there,
Yeah.
but whatever. Like I'm doing my thing. I'm having a great time. I'm doing meaningful stuff. I'm meeting cool people. I can do all that. But when things get a little bit shaky, like, you know, I had a little bit of a period of that this past year, brought me back to a pretty serious low, which fortunately I did not let devour me, but it was nonetheless, it was dark. So that's the worst part now, I find. It's like when I'm on a roll, when I'm in the flow, when things are good, to me, it feels like I could care less. But when that's not the case, it's tough. I come back to a similar. I can go back to a similar place sometimes.
Are you, when you talking about
rare.
a hard thing? Are you talking about like a you know, missed job opportunity, or like a hard
Sure, like a really bad break or whatever it is, like whatever it might be in life. You know, I mean, life throws you curveballs, and you know, I had a relationship that was, the end of it was really tough for me, and that was an example. But it could be other things, you know, like who knows, right? And there were also a multitude of things that went on that stacked on top of each other during this particular most recent period that made it hard. I mean, talk about a spiritual challenge. That's a whole, there's a bunch to talk about there. But at the same time, I've come out on the other side, and it's a great feeling too.
Yeah.
And that's always there as well. Like this every day that I complete, you know, I go to sleep and it's like got through another day, and it was actually a kick-ass day most of the time. And like that's like that feeling of triumph is pretty good. Like that makes up for a lot. So that's a personal assessment, right? Like only you can say how good of a day that you really had with what you were capable of doing, what your current set of limitations is. And so like a successful day for you is probably going to look pretty different than a successful day for me right now, because your illness is limiting you in a much more severe manner. But that doesn't mean you can't have successful days. You certainly can. And you probably know what that feels like, the days where you get some really good yoga and you get a solid meditation session and you feel like you hit a different kind of psychological or spiritual point. Right.
It depends on, like, I'd like to ask you like how you define what like a successful day means for you, because I think that might also be our definition of, you know, the results might also be different than, you know, our capabilities in the moment too.
Sure. Well, it's obvious it's a pretty complicated answer, I think, because for me it's all about my value hierarchy, right? And how everything that I do fits into that. So, you know, whatever the highest goal is, and then all the more lower and maybe more immediate goals that I can accomplish on a day-to-day basis, the things I accomplish on a weekly basis, the monthly basis, yearly basis, and the way that the positive emotion can compound as I keep moving towards all these different lower and higher level goals. And I've really been getting good at that, which is a unique skill, I think, in and of itself. It's something that I have learned through some of what Jordan Peterson has talked about. Also, a lot, like he talks about the psychology of it, whereas Andrew Huberman, are you familiar with Huberman?
I'm familiar.
I love that guy. He talks about the neuroscience of it, and there's books written about this. You probably heard of Atomic Habits. A lot about how the dopamine system works for motivation and reward, and how Jordan Peterson himself, the simplest way to say it, to understand it subjectively, is that without moving towards a valued goal, there's no positive emotion. That's probably a little bit of an oversimplification, but it's a pretty good rule of thumb. And if you pay attention to your life and you observe when you're feeling happy and you observe when you're not, it's almost always in or in absence of that. So being able to like really find things in my life that I value and that I want to work towards, and making progress towards those things, it's cool because I start to feel like I get in this sort of flow, but the flow can extend beyond just like the flow state of, like, I don't know, playing a piece of music or climbing a wall when I go rock climbing. Or it's a flow that becomes broader and a higher level thing, where it's like my entire day feels like I'm in flow, or maybe an entire week. That's extremely long time to feel like I'm in flow, and that's exceedingly rare. That doesn't happen very often. Although I do feel like it has happened in recent memory, where I have these weeks where I'm just very in touch with everything going on around me, and it's like a higher level of awareness and intuition. Like I don't know how to describe it. It's very spiritual, and it's very like it's trippy, and it's so personal that I can tell stories about some of the things I experienced, but it's like I can't make you understand it, you know. So yeah, but it's cool that you say you've been naturally drawn to try some of the meditation and yoga stuff, because I just decided within the past 6 months to really start doing more of that for myself. Not even necessarily as a way to treat the chronic pain, but just more, well, perhaps. I mean, yoga, there's always in the back of my mind, I'm stretching, I'm trying to like move things around. So, and that actually does seem to help. I would say my experience of doing yoga, at least day of a yoga practice, I feel better with my body. But I've started to really get into a decent routine of doing yoga, like at my house. Also, I go to the climbing gym. I can do like a weekly session and a class and do a little bit more advanced stuff. And also meditation. I started using the Calm app. Have you heard of Calm?
No. Is it like Headspace?
It's like Headspace. It's like all the other. And I just been using that and trying to do that every single day. Mostly mindfulness type stuff. There's a course that I'm doing right now. And I find that very, very useful for life in general, definitely not just the chronic pain thing, useful for being present, for having control over my conscious awareness and my attention, yeah, for getting a sense of just heightened at oneness with the world and things around me. And, you know, obviously the other portion of this conversation that I was probably hoping to touch on is what I was doing out in Jamaica, this past week before this. As you know, I mean, I think we talked about this before, but last year, back in January, I went to join an organization called Autoimmune Retreat for the first time. And right, we talked about this.
We talked about this, yeah.
And essentially, what they do, they've got a spot in Jamaica where they host psilocybin retreats for magic mushrooms, right? And that was my first time going and doing a retreat like that. However, I had my own experience with magic mushrooms back in college, and it was completely serendipitous. There was no thought behind it, but I had a very powerful personal transformation from that experience, and I discovered the power of what this substance has to offer, and I gained a certain amount of respect for the substance through my own experimentation, and decided that if I'm going to do and engage in any more of this, it needs to be in the right setting. You know, I need to figure out what's the way to respect this and make use of it, because it has a use that I believe it has a use. I believe it's actually a good thing, and it's healing, and it's what people need. But how do we do this right? And I want to learn more about this, and I want to meet people who are doing work with this kind of stuff. And I ended up finding Ottman, and I went out there and I had a really good time. I was one of 11 participants. There's a lot to say about that. I think Ottman is a great organization. They do really good work. And that was like, that being my first time doing something like that, especially on my own in a foreign country, I was nervous about going, and all of my fears were completely dissolved after that experience, because it was handled so professionally. Every person who came out of it was just overjoyed and so happy that they had done what they did. And it was, for many people, it was a scary leap to make, right? Not just because of the location and this being with strangers, but because of the substance itself. It's like, it's a profound thing, and it could change your life. So that's not a light decision to make. And I think most people going there knew that, and because they knew that, there was extra anxiety around it. But it was a really great thing, and then I had an amazing time, and it's like, it brought some amount of peace to my heart, knowing that feeling like I have less to worry about when I talk positively about this sort of thing, because I don't feel like I'm leading people astray. Now, I had no plans to do a retreat again because, you know, I've got other stuff going on, and
Mhm.
I do feel like I've gotten a lot from the mushrooms already. So I was like, I mean, they're telling me it's like, you kind of got most of the learning. Like, what more do you really need from us? What can we really teach you? I kind of had that sense. So I was
Mhm.
like, well, I'm not going to seek it out anymore. I'm going to like, I mean, I do like to go do some microdose hikes every now and then. To me, that's just, it's more about the hike than it is the
Mhm.
microdose, but there's a group that I do that with and meet new people. And it's just a cool little ritual to do for the hike. But that being said, I mean, I had a great time, and I was like, I mean, if the opportunity presents itself and it makes sense for me to do,
Did you get
I would
invited
consider
out by
doing
a
something
friend?
like that. Huh?
Did you get like invited out?
So I got an invitation to join Ottman again under it for a different purpose. Instead of
Mhm.
just being a participant, I was going to have the opportunity, if I applied and I got accepted, to join their work with a different organization called Vital Psychedelic Training, which is run by the same people who run the publication Psychedelics Today. Super, super legit organization, probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest organizations out there doing this kind of work, that I'm aware of. And so, uh, and they had a couple extra spots for people who were not a part of Vital's actual 12-month program, didn't pay into that necessarily, and but had maybe been to Ottman before and wanted the chance to fill those slots because, you know, they got to fill the slots, they got to get paid for, you know, the time and space that they've allocated, right, for the expenses of this whole retreat. So yeah, so I applied for that because I saw that. I was like, well, look, I mean, that's the next step for me, right? Like, I feel like I've kind of hit a certain level of personal mastery with this substance, but now I want to know, how do I share it with people properly, right? Like, how do I facilitate this in a way for harm reduction, to maximize people's personal, what they can get out of it, and to just make sure that we're respecting the plant for what it is and what it has to offer us. And I, you know, I feel a certain amount of natural curiosity towards it, and it just felt right. So I said, I'm just going to apply. Screw it. I'll do it. So I applied, also got a chance to go do that. And it was incredible. And
Mhm.
it was different as far as what I got from the mushrooms this time, because in the past, I felt like the mushrooms were giving me a lot of interesting insight into myself and my relationships. And it was more of an exploration of the shadow, I want to say, or the subconscious mind, where I was starting to understand, oh, this is like why I do these things. And this is how the behavior and relationship dynamics are for my life. And I don't really like that. I'm more aware of that now. And I want to change that. I want to act to change that. And so, um, because I felt like I kind of had hit a certain level of peace with all the prior work that I had done, with the end of my relationship, and then getting through that and coming out on the other side and feeling so great about my life again,
Mhm.
prior to even going and doing this whole trip, the experience that I had on the mushrooms was like was a different level. It was completely qualitatively different, and it was not there was almost no period of that trip where I was plagued by any kind of darkness. It was pure light. It was just it was like I was in a place where no matter what I thought about, no matter what came to me, no matter what challenge presented itself
Mhm.
to me, I couldn't be hurt by it. I couldn't be scared of it.
You
I
stop,
couldn't
yeah.
be sad because of it. Everything was good. Everything was part of higher goodness. And um and I felt like I was a part of that, and I was doing my best to bring that to reality in a sense. Um and uh and I mean, oh man, in terms of how I actually felt, I felt like almost boundless. I didn't feel like some people say, where they say like, oh, I felt like I had complete ego death, or I lost a sense of self. Or no, I very much was there. I mean, I was lying there on that mat, and I
Mhm.
knew who I was, and I knew where I was, and I knew all these things. But it felt like this boundless potential within me, and this energy that just wanted to just like just break out in joy and laughter and excitement. And I wanted to, like, there was a moment where I was like feeling like I just was like, I had this kind of inhuman strength where I felt like I could just punch through a wall. Like it was unbelievable, man. I don't even know how to, I've never had an experience like that from psilocybin before. So these substances, they have, I think how we react to them have a lot more to do with us than what the substance is actually doing itself, you know? And because I was in the particular setting, the particular mental place that I was, the spiritual place that I was, having done a lot of this yoga work and meditation work and breath work, even some stuff that I had been doing as part of the meditation, I used those tools in that experience, and it brought me to a higher level that I had never been before. And it wasn't like, again, people who've never done psychedelics, you think, oh wow, so like it makes you basically psychotic, like you're just completely disconnected from reality and everything is just chaotic and nothing makes any sense. It's like far from it.
Depends on the psychedelic too.
Huh?
It probably depends a little bit on what you're doing too, but I think
that's for sure. That's for sure. And in this case, I'm only speaking about mushrooms, but
yeah, and I think those are generally good, unless I think you can go overboard with anything.
You can always go overboard. You can always go overboard. But
I think there's a lot of positive value that could be, utilized with things like, especially when it comes to psilocybin, and like, there's been a lot of clinical trials too, where people, just have been brought out of depression at crazy rates with just small doses of psilocybin. Like there's so much good work out there, and just because it's currently a Schedule I substance and people look down upon it, and the government's been running propaganda campaigns against it for like probably a century or so at this point. It's hard to see something like that being brought into fruition within the next 5 to 10 years, but I think you're right. I think there's definitely a good possibility.
Well, the way that this retreat was done was also fantastic. The intention was for us to get hands-on experience facilitating a psychedelic trip. And since I had been to Ottman before, I was already very familiar with how they did a lot of their processes, and I love what they do. I think it's really well organized and all of that. But the way that they made it so that we could also get not just a psychedelic journey for ourselves, but also sit for someone as we were paired up with someone. And then we basically did 2 ceremonies and we swapped roles, right, for the ceremony. Does that make sense? So and so we developed like kind of an interesting connection with our partners, and everyone related differently, and everyone had such a wide variety of experiences. As far as I could tell, I was the only person who was really having a completely purely light time. Most other people, not everyone, there were other people who were having good times, but from what I saw and what I heard in the sharing, there was a lot of deep, darker emotional processing going on too. And it's all personal, as I said before. So, I felt like I learned a lot, and being able to sit and be there for someone else during a trip, the way that you have to do so little, I think, really, to be a good sitter. Because there's like this spectrum of like being someone who's sitting versus maybe even facilitating is a slightly stronger word. And then being like a therapist is like a whole nother level, where now it starts to feel like you have more of an actual active responsibility in trying to direct and interact. But the reason why they use the sitting method, and actually, by the way, I wouldn't even put any of these ideas on a higher level. I think sitting versus being a therapist, it can be just as healing.
Is sitting more of like a supportive role? Like you're
more passive and supportive, reactive. It's reactive. Yeah. So like basically you're present, you're there with the person. If they need anything, they reach out to you, they ask you for something, they right.
That's so
but
sick.
mostly it's just to be a healing presence, right? And it's so funny that this is like what I ended up doing, because I'm actually reading this book by a Christian psychologist, Albert S. Rossi. Christian psychologist, right? It's called Becoming a Healing Presence. And it basically talks about the power of the breath, the power of stillness. And I'm like, this is coming from a Christian? Like, what? This is not something I'm from, like, it's not typical Christian speak, right? And I was reading that book up until the sit, and I felt like I was able to really tap into that. And I meditated for like 5 or 6 hours, basically. I took one break in between to go get lunch.
Mhm.
But other than that, I was just sitting there doing nothing the great majority of the time. Yeah, no, that's actually all I did. I took some
Did
like
you feel any
note.
pain while you were meditating?
I mean, honestly, if I'm being completely honest with you, the whole time I was on that trip, the pain was pretty irrelevant to me. You know, it's one of those things. Now, yes, I think the pain was active during my sit. The pain was not like there was too much going on for me to notice the pain during my own trip. Whereas when I was sitting,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I was sitting, and so like, especially depending the way that you're sitting, right? Like,
Were you on something while you were, sitting
no,
or meditating?
no.
No, you were just there.
So their philosophy at Ottman is for the sit, you should be sober, and that makes sense. In general, like right, because
Mhm.
that you're kind of
Yeah.
meant to be there and be responsible and be able to fully function.
Mhm.
So if the other person needs like water or any kind of emergency situation might even happen, right? Like you can act quickly and clearly, and there's not
Mhm.
right. That being said, um there were some differences in opinion a little bit on some of the methodologies, and um, I think they just serve different purposes. And I think I haven't made my mind up yet on what the most appropriate way to do this is. But someone made an argument about how they believe that doing it like this, having one person use the medicine and have another person just sit there and be in their typical everyday state. I mean, it helps that if the person who's a sitter is already very experienced,
Mhm.
right? That's actually really good and maybe doesn't necessitate this, but that it's maybe more ideal if the sitter also is partaking, but is taking a very low dose, right? So something
Mhm.
like a microdose, so sub-perceptible or slightly above a microdose to the point where like you might get some like very, very, very subtle and vague visual effects. You might feel a little bit more open and emotional, but like not in a way that's going to disconnect
Yeah.
you from reality or inhibit your functioning to handle
Mhm.
whatever may come up. So there was some talk about that, which I found kind of interesting, and I don't really know how much of a difference it makes. I haven't completely, like I said, made up my mind, but it's interesting to think about these things because right, these are like protocols essentially for treatment that are being developed actively by organizations like this, and they're kind of just the forerunners. And interestingly enough, I know that they have pulled a lot of their practices from what places like Johns Hopkins are designing from their own research. Yes, in fact, uh, I think something from Johns Hopkins that was developed was read before our trip.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's super exciting stuff. And it's to me, I don't know. I'm very much I'm very optimistic, but like also trying to like kind of contain my own zeal for this sort of thing because like
Mhm.
I don't want to be too hasty and kind of get ahead of myself and realize that it's going to take time for our world to be prepared and people to be open to these kinds of experiences. But I see so much potential, and I know, and to me, with the state of the world and what I see going on, it almost feels um like critical and to a point where if we don't at some point in time in the near future figure out how to access um a different level of spirituality and a deeper level of reality and not just be stuck in our heads, stuck in our rational left-brained way of thinking about things. One person on the retreat called it this idea of disembodied intellect, where you're completely disconnected from everything else that's going on in yourself except just your mind and the words and the
Mhm.
thoughts in your head,
Mhm.
right? And mushrooms can free you from that. That's for me one of the most noticeable experiences that I have, where I just let go. Normally I've got words going in my brain like 24/7, like there's a song playing, I'm thinking about the lyrics, or I'm thinking about ideas, or I'm wondering about an interaction I just had with someone, and I'm hyper
Mhm.
analyzing that, like, oh, should I have
Yeah.
done this, should I have done that. um there are a lot of people in this world in power who are described as people who are disembodied intellects, and unfortunately what that does is it means that we lack empathy, we lack compassion, we lack
Yeah.
we lack intuition. We lack our ability to understand our own emotions, so we can't understand other people's emotions. We can't. I think it just disconnects us from our spirituality and our sense of meaning and purpose, and the deeper aspects of ourselves. And that's not to denigrate ideas and words and and communication and like what we're doing right now. This is how we communicate. Like there's levels that there's nonverbal communication and there's this kind of communication. We can transfer a lot of knowledge through this way. So that's not to denigrate it, but it's like it's a one-sided way of dealing with the world, and the world is multifaceted, right? It's complicated. So I think that this kind of work is going to become more and more relevant, and we'll see where things goes. I mean, a lot of what's holding it up right now is just legal limitations, right? So it's exciting stuff. It's exciting stuff. I mean, yeah. You've what's going on, Nick? You just walking around. Yeah, you've had some is there someone else in the room? Your mic's off.
Oh, rip.
Have you had some experience with psilocybin?
Yes. Well, I've tried it a few times.
Okay.
Every time I have, like, I don't know, it depends entirely on the environment I'm in. So like if I'm like out in a grassy field with like people I'm comfortable with, it's like awesome. But for some reason, when I'm in like a synthetic environment, like a house or like trying to watch TV, it's just terrible. It's like, why do people do this? This is so unenjoyable. Yeah. Like I walk through a door and I'm like, why do we have this? You know, like why does this exist? Like it's like it's so synthetic. I look like a door handle. I'm like, this is so unnatural. Like why people shouldn't be doing this? Like. Or like I see a dog like running around and like there's barking. I'm like, obviously he doesn't have enough space in this small home. Like you should be outside. Like
isn't that interesting? You know? How you can you can kind of understand animals like more intuitively.
Yeah. Like I would just like look at a dog misbehaving and I'm like, dude, you have a giant golden retriever,
right?
Shitty ass frat house. Of course he's gonna misbehave. Like you gotta fucking put the guy outside at least. Like So I don't know.
His energy can't be contained.
Yeah, his energy. Yeah, not in a fucking not like in a 10 by 10 wooden box. Like the guy, he's sliding around on the wooden tiles and he's just like barking at everyone.
Yep.
Of course, the guy's gonna misbehave.
I
don't know. It gives you I guess it definitely puts you in touch kind of with your primal roots, right? And it kind of gives you some of that spiritual energy. But I'm not sure how much of that is too much for the contemporary world, right? Because we do live in a very
synthetic. Oh yes. That is where.
If you go too far down that road, it feels like you're going to have a lot of negative consequences too.
For sure. No, yeah. Our world is really not ready for it. That's kind of what I was saying earlier, where it's like if you
maybe our world's too. Maybe not ready for it is a little bit. Maybe it's more like our world's not like too far past it, like culturally, just because like we're evolving so far, like the industrial sense and the technological sense. Not like I think getting in touch, if everybody were on board, obviously it would be, I think, overall a good thing for society. But maybe we're kind of past that point where people, are too obsessed with their own status or their own grind or whatever they're invested in, that it's just not feasible for like a culture to happen at that moment.
Well, yeah, I think the key here is like what you're saying is true to an extent. It's like we've gotten so far from our roots. It's like, how can we ever go back? But I think the answer to that is, well, a little bit of what we're going through with these chronic pain issues. I think most likely like things like, I mean, autoimmune to me, that seems so environmental. That seems like it's like, what have we been putting in our bodies? What's going on with all the pesticides we use, the GMOs,
the food we eat,
like these sorts of things. I mean, our environment has seen radical changes due to technological advancement in the past, not even very long, as 50 years, there's been exponential change. And like, and so I think what's going to happen, and what is already happening, is people are suffering, and they're going to start suffering more and more and more and more and more. And it's going to get to a point where they reach a peak of desperation for things, right? And so even if people are not really ready, they might start feeling like they have no other options, And it does take you getting to a certain a certain dark place, I think, sometimes to really be motivated to change, right? So
Yeah.
that's what, like, and I think the proof is in the pudding of this. Okay, this technological world that we've created, it's magical in and of itself. It's amazing, the fact that we're even doing this right now. It's worthwhile to have gratitude for that and to not be naive about the greatness of that. And yet this process and this way that we have been heading almost single-mindedly as, like, you know, we must keep innovating technology, we must keep pushing the limits on all these things, and like we have all these problems, yes, but tech is the answer. Just more tech, more, and we just keep going down this one narrow path. And guess what? As we do it, people are getting sicker and sicker and sicker. We're creating more and more problems, right? I mean, COVID. The virus itself was a result of human experimentation and attempts to innovate that went wrong. The vaccine, with all of its side effects, was a result of the same exact root activity, like the same worldview, the same value system, the same motivations. All these things are tied up into that, and their lives are not getting better. Rates of suicidality, depression are going up, not down. So when you keep trying a thing, it's literally the definition of insanity. You know,
it is.
trying the same thing over and over and over again, and things keep getting worse. You know,
we do make progress, though, still in the kind of industrial, I guess, zone. If we don't wipe ourselves out first, maybe some technology like artificial intelligence.
There's progress of sorts here and there, for sure.
Could lead to our ultimate destruction, or ultimate whatever transcendence, I guess.
Yeah, right. Transcendence into the Ready Player One world. That's not what we're meant for.
I don't think so either. But have you ever heard the kind of theory that we're kind of like the sex organs of the machine world, right?
Yeah,
you've heard that
for sure.
Right?
I believe that's the beast, though.
The beast. You believe that's the beast? Oh, okay, I could see it.
So I think that's what brings about the potential for our destruction the most.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I don't know if you want to like delve into this at all, but I was talking about this with someone else recently. Are you familiar with the concept of like astrological ages? Have you heard of this concept?
No, I haven't.
Okay, it's pretty out there stuff, and honestly, like something I would have been very resistant to prior. But the more time, I mean, I've been aware of this idea for some time, but I've just kind of kept it as like a sort of more of like just like an afterthought of it, just a curious concept more than anything else. But you're familiar, of course, with the fact that Jesus Christ is associated with the symbol of a fish, right?
Yeah.
And you know that symbol is also associated with the astrological sign Pisces.
Yeah,
correct.
I just gotta get this out there because I'm starting to flare a little bit. Like I can't look at a screen for more than an hour or two at a time still.
Okay.
So we'll get through this and then we'll wrap it up a little bit.
Okay, we'll wrap after this. Well, this is a good way to end the first episode. To me, this is what's up right now. Okay. Okay. So this is brilliant. This piece written on Medium of all places. Lots of interesting garbage written on that website. Everyone has an opinion on things, right? But this piece is fascinating to me because if you're willing to be open-minded enough to consider it, it's quite curious and interesting. So I'll walk through this with you. So actually, just maybe even for your own eyes, if you want to follow along, I will. By the way, that I think I accidentally added an extra bracket there, so let me just resend that.
Cool.
So I'm just going to read it out loud, and you can also read on your own pace, whatever. But so there's this idea in astrology of astrological ages, and I forget exactly what it is about the position of the stars and the position of all the cosmic bodies that define these ages. But in general, it's accepted that these ages last for around 2,000-ish years. Okay, there's a cycle of this, and it goes through all the different signs. So people would say that the age of Pisces began around the year 0 AD, and it is now 2023. And like I said before, Jesus Christ was associated with the symbol of Pisces. And I'm just adding that context here, because that's not mentioned in this story. But essentially, we're at a point where the idea would be that we're now transitioning into a new age. Now, what does that mean? Okay, so this piece says Age of Pisces versus Age of Aquarius, a journey into collective transcendence. We just started talking about collective transcendence with VR, or a different kind of transcendence, perhaps. So let's see. The Age of Pisces has shaped human history for around 2,000 years and is slowly coming to an end as the Age of Aquarius takes its turn. There is no firm consensus among astrologers as to when the Age of Pisces began, and even less to when it ends exactly. But what is certain is that the transition between these two astrological ages has already started, and one of its biggest aspects is the battle between science and religion that has marked the development of human society for the past centuries. I think we can both agree that battle between science and religion is a very key characteristic of the time that we've been living, and even in the many years prior to that, right? As science has developed. The Age of Pisces defines a time where human beings engage more than ever in the matters of the soul. The ideas of human transcendence, dissolution of the self, and connection to a higher ideal consolidated in the collective consciousness and took shape in various forms. The birth of Jesus Christ, the founding of the church, and establishment of one fundamental religion were a few great marks of this time, which influenced human life until today. The energy of Pisces brought to life the notions of forgiveness, empathy, innocence, love, and devotion. To me, that's the New Testament, right? That's the key themes that were kind of highlighted in a new way, that were added on to the current understanding of the Bible, right? It established the belief in a higher force and the search for the connection to something greater than the self. The conception of good and bad, heaven and hell, sin and sacrifice shaped the meaning of spirituality in a new way, right? Coming out of the paganistic world into the monotheistic world, Christianity, where we focus a lot on good and evil, the afterlife, and then how sacrifice plays into all of that. And the fight for the dissolution of the ego and higher ideals are not the only thing that Pisces represents, though. In the search for transcendence hides the search for escape. Pisces in its darker form can lead to a loss of the sense of reality, self-destruction, drug abuse, alcoholism, or any other addiction focused on escapism. Religious fanaticism and intolerance gain force, and the idea of guilt and suffering settled as synonyms for spirituality. That is my favorite line in this whole piece. The idea of guilt and suffering settled as synonyms for spirituality, as if that is all that spirituality is. It's all about your guilt for original sin and your guilt for the ways that you sin, and the suffering that you experience is somehow, it is divine, and the suffering and the beauty of the suffering we go through, there's a divinity to that. But then that all the spirituality was sort of collapsed into those two ideas, right? The Age of Aquarius symbolizes the time of discovery, innovation, and progress. It represents the thirst for change and the longing for a better future. I mean, all these very active, progressive political movements that are borderline utopian, right? It represents a ruler of the collective. Aquarius speaks of humanitarian ideals, cooperation, and brotherhood. It also rules the realms of the personal and collective mind, the searching and sharing of information, and the fight for personal and intellectual freedom. What's that?
The last paragraph there sums it up pretty well in those the ideas of, progress versus tradition, mind versus soul, or God versus machine.
Yeah. Do you want to go through the rest of it, or how are you feeling?
I just wanted to point that last part out.
We will get there. I want to connect it all. For the last centuries, the Aquarian energy has been gaining force, which can be seen in many moments of human history, like the French Revolution, the Greek evolution of democracy, bringing the progressive ideals of freedom, brotherhood, and equality into form. The storming of the Bastille in 1789 symbolizes the breaking of prisons, represented by Pisces, and the movement against old authoritarian order. And it was also in the 16th century that first appeared the concept of atheism, and the resistance against the traditional religious structure gained strength. At the same time, science has been developing in faster rates each year and has already completely changed societal structures. Technological advancement permitted the invention of machines. Internet opened a full range of new possibilities for social connections. Social media completely changed the way human beings interact, and globalization may be one of the greatest marks of the age. Moreover, collective thinking and technological advancement are contributing to the fight against social and economic inequality, and the fight for expression and freedom of identity has opened the door for more diversity and acceptance. But the fight for freedom also pays a price. On the dark side of the Aquarian age lies disorder, rebellion, breaking of rules, skepticism, and the change above everything mentality. The current growth of progressive thinking has created a countercurrent of conservatism, discrimination, and religious fanaticism, and the obsession with technological advancement has also brought negative consequences to the world we live in. That is for sure. In final words, the transition of the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius represents the battle between two different systems, progress versus tradition, mind versus soul, or God versus machine. But it also represents the possibility for joining the spiritual to the collective, a time in which the longing for transcendence and divine connection surpasses the barriers of identity, race, color, and social status, to a place where all humanity may reach the eternal universal connection. So I just found that to be appropriate in terms of what I know of history, and the, I would say, just the overall trend that I have sensed in the world, both the positive and negative aspects of it. And it's just so cool to me that Jesus, who would be like kind of the Messiah of this age, is also very oftentimes associated with the Pisces fish symbol. So I don't know. That's very interesting to me. And there's a lot of other ideas around this. This was just a article that I found that summarized it in a easily digestible way. And so I just thought I would read that, just food for thought for you and anyone who might be watching this. And how are you feeling about your pain? Do you want to call it now? I feel like we covered a lot of topics.
I'm gonna we'll wrap it up here in a few minutes, because I actually haven't been able to look at a screen for 2 hours consecutively in about a month. So this is actually like a new record for me.
Progress.
Yeah, for sure. But I don't know. I just think that's so interesting because, Jesus kind of, you're saying ushered in the era of, Pisces, is commonly associated with the, with that fish symbol. And then we got that kind of 2,000-year period, between, 0 BC or whatever. And, probably around the Renaissance era would be, when things started changing.
Sure.
Aquarius,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that's when we had things like the Enlightenment and
the Enlightenment. Isn't that an interesting name for a thing? Yeah.
Interesting, right? And then and religion still dominated during that era, right? But that's kind of like when the ideas started to break out of, like, we had all these intellectual things. People started transitioning over towards the idea of progress, the idea of mind over soul, the idea of progress over tradition. People like Galileo get thrown. I don't know. It's crazy. It's crazy to think about something like something. I wouldn't normally believe in astrology either. I don't know. It's
a framework. It's a framework for understanding the patterns of reality. That's the way I see it. And does it have predictive validity? Well, that's yet to be seen, right? But
it is. I don't want to get too into this because it's still just a Medium article, right?
Absolutely. It's probably the worst source for this sort of thing. Yet I just felt like it was so it was concise and well written, and it covers a lot of things to like really pique your interest. So that's why I selected it. Yeah.
Even a broken clock's right twice a day, right?
Right. Right. So
but yeah, I don't know. I could talk about this. We could talk about this kind of stuff for hours in person, if I'm being totally honest. But I know I should hop off.
I presented this because it's a fairly new idea to me, and it jogged my mind. It's just another tool to add to the toolkit to explore reality. And
mine's already putting pieces together on this. I'm actually really glad you brought this up before we adjourn.
Right. Do your own research, right? Everyone, folks, that's what it's all about. Don't trust the experts ever.
I literally don't even trust myself anymore, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. So cool.
But yeah.
Well, hey, man, this was fun.
Yeah, no, for sure. Hopefully we'll get a chance soon to actually talk and meet up in person too. So
yeah, well, hopefully you figure this thing out sooner rather than later, or at least you get strong enough that you can get out of your house and you can come visit, and there's always a place for you here. So
cool. Yeah, for sure. Did you ever have Brad move in?
Yeah, Brad's here. Yeah,
Brad's there. Oh, sick.
Been having a great time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. One thing I want to add too is I did get the chance just this past week. Do you remember Andrew Chen? I think you remember this guy. He was the dude who did acid at our college dorm and had a really not so good experience. And that was, you know, that was the whole thing. But he lives in Taiwan and he has been there since COVID. He finally made a plan to come back to the States, and he came to visit us, and we hung out with him. We had a really good time. And because he was here for such a short amount of time, I floated the idea of, hey man, I just got some training to do, like some psychedelic sitting, and maybe you might be curious in doing it the right way this time. And he was like, hey, you know, well, we had just the right number of days. I carved out some time for it. I sat with him. I set up the ceremony. I tried to replicate it to the T as close as I could to how we did it in Jamaica. And it was a beautiful experience. He had a great time. It wasn't, I wouldn't describe it as transformative because at the end of the day, he ended up playing it. He played it pretty safe on the dosage and all that. And I think that's what he was ready for. We always get what we're ready for. With
that
this
was crazy to see. That was just watching him, like going out in the living room and just seeing him on the couch, just like mentally.
Oh, you're talking about the last,
the last time,
yeah, man. Who knows what was going on with that? He talked a little bit more about that also because he was remembering more things about it. But well, that's part of the reason why I'm not as gung-ho about recommending LSD. Not to say that we know that for sure that the LSD is the primary factor there, because there may have been other things going on with maybe other medications he was taking. I don't know. We can't. I can't say for sure. I don't know. But yeah. Anyways, this time was not that. This time was much better, and it was very grounded, and we had some good conversations out of it. And I got to also have my first time kind of just doing a thing like this on my own, and I plan to do more of that. I plan to do it at least semi-professionally for a little bit. So we'll see.
No, I'd love to be a patient of yours one day, honestly.
Yeah, whenever you're ready. That's I like to say, like, there's a time and place for it for anyone. So
honestly, if I could do it tomorrow, I probably would.
You would, yeah. Well, hey, get better. Get better first. That could be a higher order goal for you. You get the opportunity to do that once you get better. So maybe that will kick things into gear. We'll see.
Yeah, no, I definitely something to strive for, because if I have that chance to just take that plane flight, you know, sit down for an hour on a plane, God, that would be so miserable.
Yeah.
But yeah, and just, I don't know, for sure we'll find a time.
Good stuff, my guy. Well, thanks for talking.
Yeah.
Be well. Hope things start clicking and clearing up for you in one way or another. I guess just every day strive for the progress and do the best you can. And
it's hard for people like us to take things one step at a time. You know, we like solving problems.
Instant gratification. Welcome to the world. Yeah, dude. Yeah, take it slow, but also slow and steady, and stay in touch, and hope to hear from you soon, and hope to see you back in the Bay.
Yeah, man. I hope I do hope we get to see each other soon. It sounds like you're having a good time. Don't go too far off the deep end there. I know you're
trust me. I don't plan to do my own trip for a long time. Yeah. I mean, I think that I'll be exploring other plant medicines in the future. Psilocybin feels like it kind of hit max level. I don't really know. I don't know what is better beyond that, or what I had. So I feel like I'm just tempted. I'm just pushing. I'm testing fate too much by doing that sort of thing. Whereas the other medicines, I think they have other properties that I'm curious about. So, but yeah, no, I will. I am responsible. At the end of the day, that's responsibility is the foundation,
if nothing else,
of any kind of healthy experimentation with these sort of things. So yeah. Yep.
I'm not too worried about you, to be honest, but I just want to make sure, you know,
appreciate that you're
on you too, you know. So
because you're concerned, it means you care. So I'll take
always
that.
I'll catch you later, man.
All right. Talk to you later. Next. See you.